My name is Elijah Lewis. I was born a Quaker and died a Quaker, and therein lies the great contradiction of my life. Although I was a pacifist by nature and by conviction, I fought and was nearly killed in the great and bloody conflict that you would call the Civil War. Because I believed with all my heart that the need to destroy the institution of slavery outweighed my Savior's demand to turn the other cheek. As a military commander, I led freed black men and escaped slaves in battle and led many of them to their deaths. A struggle that I would deal with for the rest of the 80 years of my life. I was born in 1833 in Chester County, Pennsylvania, into an old and honored Quaker family in which the fire of abolition burned very, very hot. My uncle Enoch Lewis was published one of the leading abolitionist newspapers, and our family as a whole was very convicted about the need to end slavery. Because Quakers are very practical people in general, I was trained to be a miller, though I did have extensive education growing up. For some years I taught in schools in Chester County while living at home, and I helped on the farm as well as the mill that my family owned. When I was 27, the Civil War erupted in 1861, and I experienced a huge crisis of conscience. On one hand, my faith told me that any act of aggression was not appropriate. The other side said that fighting for the liberation of innocents who were caught in slavery seemed like a just cause. Finally, on the 23rd of August, 1862, I enlisted as a sergeant in Company F of the 68th Regiment of the Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry. A year later, an opportunity arose that seemed almost providential. During the September of 1863, at Camp William Penn near Philadelphia, a regiment began to form made up completely of freed black men and escaped slaves. At this time in history, black people and white people could not fight alongside each other in battle. Actually, the U.S. military did not integrate until the conflict that you would call World War II. So separate units were needed. Also, even in Union states, though they were freed, black people were considered unfit to command. And so though they had their own regiments, they needed white officers. I applied for the commission, and on October 15th, 1863, I was appointed First Lieutenant of Company F, 8th Infantry Regiment of the U.S. Colored Troops. During January of 1864, we were assigned to the Army of the South and were deployed to Florida, which proved to be a trial by fire. At the Battle of Olustee, fought in February of that same year, it was an especially deadly time for my unit. During the battle, after several enlisted color bearers had been killed, I picked up our nation's flag and carried it, rounding up our troops. We suffered a terrible defeat and were forced to retreat, and our losses were terrible, largely because the Confederate Army did take no prisoners. Any black person that they found alive on the field or captured, they did murder. There were no prisoners from that battle, so our losses were very extensive. They were terrible days, and the 8th Regiment was soon transferred to the Army of Virginia. But in part because of my performance at the battle, I was promoted to the rank of captain and placed in command of Company F during September of 1864. A month later, while leading my troops at the battle called Darbytown Road of Virginia, I was shot and was not expected to survive. I did, however, but it took many months to recover completely. So I was reassigned to Camp William Penn to command troops until General Lee's surrender in April of 1865. When the war ended officially, I was well enough to accompany my troops as assistant commander to Texas, where we put in a few rather frustrating months of little activity until we were finally redeployed to Philadelphia and honorably discharged in December of 1865. Exhausted after the war, I decided to make a fresh start in the West and located in Burlington in 1866. Then came west on a stagecoach to Chariton during February of 1867 after my family and I purchased the Phoenix Flouring Mill, then located near the square. Eventually, my parents and all of my siblings joined me here, well, myself and my brother Evan, and all are buried with me together in this plot. My brother and I remained active in the milling business, but my sister Sarah, this is her tomb, her grave plot, and I entered the publishing field, editing and publishing the Chariton Patriot until 1897. In addition, I was elected to 2 terms as county treasurer and served as the Chariton postmaster during the presidency of Benjamin Harrison. I was also among the organizers of the Chariton Volunteer Fire Department. I was in my mid-60s and restless when opportunities arose in our nation's capital, so I moved east again in 1897, always returning to Chariton and my family when Congress was not in session. I served as a clerk of the Interstate and the Foreign Commerce Committee of the House of Representatives for 2 congressional terms, then accepted an appointment as congressional messenger, a position I held until I was in my late 70s. My death occurred in my 80th year of life in Washington, D.C. on March 14, 1913. By that time, all of my siblings, as well as my parents, were deceased. And because I had never married, only my nephews and nieces were left. A nephew accompanied my remains to my home in Chariton, where Quaker services were held for me in one of the courtrooms at the courthouse before my burial here. This is the tribute that my nephew prepared for my funeral. Elijah Lewis was a man whose entire life was unselfishly devoted to 3 generations of his family and to his friends. He was without ambition for advancement, either in the army or in civil life, except as such advancement enabled him to better serve those who were dear to him. He was frugal in everything that might give him comfort or pleasure, and did not permit himself the luxury of even a single vice. But he gave of his substance to those he loved with a liberality that had no limits. Thank you.